Wow, you guys are so loud. Wow. Thank you. Wow, thank you for coming. My name is Joe Grand, and this is going to be the least technical talk probably of the entire day. Is that good? Are your brains tired? Yeah, okay. So I don't think there's any technology in this at all. This presentation are basically kind of stories of growing up in the hacker world at a time where hackers weren't really understood as much as they are today, whether good side or bad side, they just weren't understood at all. And sort of going into some stories about that, talk about some projects I worked on. And really the moral of all of this stuff is that you really just want to find what you love to do and just keep doing it no matter what anybody else says, and you'll end up being successful by whatever definition you make it. And you'll see what I mean as we go through this. So I'll start off with a picture. I got involved in computers in 1982. So I was 8 years old here, very happy. I drew a picture of the Atari 400 computer. How many of you drew a picture of your first computer? Oh, come on, somebody had to. Nobody? IBM PC, no. So yeah, computers were my life. This is all I've ever done, and it's just something that it clicked. Like as soon as I discovered the computer, I just knew that that's what I wanted to do, is computers, and from that, electronics as well. I was, kind of a kid with big, thick glasses. My parents both worked, so I would walk home from school, and the computer would babysit me for the rest of the day. I started off kind of playing video games. I had an older brother who was six years older than me, that he was the inspiration, and he kind of taught me how to use a computer. And then he sort of got bored with it and became a musician. So it was great for me because I got to inherit all of his discs and everything. So here I am a few years later, and this is really a time where I discovered bulletin board systems, other computer systems that you could connect to with a modem, very early before the internet, but a very similar concept is you're connecting two computers together. And this is something where if you had a computer at the time, you were basically just dealing with other computer hobbyists, other people that were interested in computers. There was no industry around computer security. The internet at this point was very, very simple, ARPANET. It was a bunch of machines connected from some universities. And the hacker community was literally a bunch of kids in their parents' bedrooms and basements and rooms exploring computers. Like, that's what it was. So there was no kind of goal of like, I'm going to be a hacker when I grow up and I'm going to have a career out of, breaking systems or whatever. It just wasn't the case. It was just so cool. One of the problems with bulletin board systems is you had to use the telephone line, and if you called outside of your local area, that cost a lot of money. So when I was 10 is when I figured out how to make my first free phone call so I could connect to bulletin board systems further away so I could actually get better games, right? Because everybody sort of local groups had different games. And that didn't seem wrong to me. It just seemed like a normal thing to do. Okay, use this access code, dial this number, type in this code, and you get free phone calls. It made sense. I didn't even think about it as being illegal, and I probably still don't, because it's big companies controlling the telephone systems. They deserve to get ripped off anyway. But this sort of set the stage for things to come, like my love of electronics and my love of computers. I did try my hand at programming, so I'll show you my first program I ever wrote. I think I was 8 years old. This was 1983. Anyone seen Doctor Who? Yeah? The dog, right? K9 was the dog, so I loved K9. I thought he was so cool. So I wrote a program in BASIC, and I actually learned hexadecimal by messing around with the computer as well, because I would modify people's crack screens, and it would say game cracked by Ninja Master or whatever. I would go in with the hex editor and change the values, not knowing that I was modifying hexadecimal and modifying ASCII, but it would change the result on the screen, so it would say modified by, actually I was Black Ninja at the time, so modified by Black Ninja. So just sort of messing around. But this is the program. Let's see. So I got my start screen here, and I'm going to warn you, I don't know what the audio is going to sound like because we haven't fully tested it. It could be loud, so get ready to cover your ears, because I have some sound in here too. So I'll stop that. That's the sound of K9 if you remember. At least that's how I remember K9 sounding. So after getting involved in computer, and bulletin board systems, I discovered this sort of underground world where, besides just trading games, people started trading telephone codes and passwords to other systems that they found through war dialing. And it was just this progression of using the computer system. And basically, I devolved into this life of kind of technological mischief, is what I call it. Actually, I call it technological juvenile delinquency, because I was just kind of a troublemaking kid, but instead of doing it always in person, I was doing it on the computer. And again, it seemed natural to me. So, I don't know what happened to my head. Got chopped off. These pictures were I was around 13 years old, and besides being into computers, which already was sort of a bad thing to be, if you're into computers back in the day, you were basically a nerd and nobody wanted to hang out with you or anything. I was also into skateboarding, which was bad. Got into punk rock music, so sort of all of these subcultures. And it's funny because looking back at it now, I've been trying to figure out, how did I even get involved in this, and why does the normal world seem so weird? And it's because I've never actually fit into the normal world. And I've always been attracted to these other worlds where I can sort of do what I want to do and say what I want to say and express myself the way I want to do it. And it just happened that all of these different things I got into were these subcultures. So yeah, all of this stuff is really kind of funny. This picture on the lower right, I used to hang out at this place. It was like a clothing store, and I'll get into some of the stuff that we did, but that was sort of our headquarters for me and some friends of doing lots of mischievous activities. So getting into computers were one thing, but electronics was the other thing, because computers at that time were very basic platforms, and you could write simple code for them. You didn't have a lot of abstraction and operating systems and overhead like you do today. You had operating systems, but they were much lower level. So you could actually create hardware to interface with your computer. But I was also into all sorts of other building of hardware, being mischievous, and I'd read electronics magazines and build projects, and then figure out how to modify those to do something else. And then from there, I would go and build my own stuff. So it's not that much different than today. If somebody says, oh, I'm interested in whatever networking thing or sniffing network traffic, I'm going to use existing tools first, and then I'm going to try it on a system that's been hacked, and then I'm going to modify that to work on a different system. Same sort of process, just sort of exploring. Some of these things, I don't know if you saw the phone phreaking talk earlier today, a few hours ago, where one of the phone phreaking devices that he talked about was a red box, which is a way that you could get free phone calls by spoofing the sounds that the coin made as it went into the telephone. Down at the bottom picture here, you can't really see it because it's chopped off and really blurry because my camera wasn't good back then. But that was a little circuit that would generate the tones, and I fit it into a pager, like what you'd wear on your waist. And so I could walk around and look normal and then hold it up to the payphone and get free phone calls. And ended up selling those a lot in high school to my friends and other people, and made a decent amount of money. And some other phone phreaking sorts of things. Up here is a universal garage door opener. Normal garage doors will have a transmitter that you would have in your car, and then the receiver that would be on the garage door side. And you'd set the password with some dip switches on the transmitter to match the receiver. So what I did is just cut out all the switches and replaced it with a little circuit that would cycle through all of the possible combinations. So you could just stand there and hold the button down, and eventually it would guess the right password to open the garage door. I didn't actually steal anything from the garages that I opened in that case. My wife doesn't believe me, but it's true. I didn't actually steal anything. But that was something of having that power, right? Having the skill and that tool to know that you could do it. Just like lockpicking, just like all sorts of other, exploit development, where normally you're not going to use it for something malicious. And it was just having that power I thought was really fun. So here's just a little picture of, I had books, like notebooks of, like graffiti writers have their books of all their tags and drawings. I had books filled with passwords and phone numbers and all sorts of stuff that if I had gotten caught with these, it probably would have been pretty bad. Credit card numbers. It was ridiculous. Stacks of books. And this was just, sort of my engineering personality of everything just written down very carefully, which is sort of how you always hear about organized crime getting busted because their finance person had written everything down perfectly, and you're like, why did they do that? They're breaking the law. Why would they document everything? And that's exactly the same thing here. There was a few times when I actually had to hide a bunch of this stuff at my brother's girlfriend's house because I thought I was going to get raided by the police, so hid everything. Luckily, that didn't happen. But actually what ended up happening, so besides this, got involved in a hacker group called Renegade Legion, which basically were a bunch of kids doing mischievous types of stuff. We got into credit card fraud, mostly just for ourselves. We didn't sell credit cards very often, but again, we're a bunch of teenagers, and teenagers, now I've learned, and I've been studying this because my kids are almost teenagers, they don't really have the brain capacity. It hasn't developed to think about the future and to think about consequences. So anytime you see dumb teenage kids doing something, you can just blow it off as like they don't have the brain yet. And when I was doing this stuff, like I didn't have the brain for it. I just didn't think about it. And ultimately, I got arrested. So, there's probably no big surprise there. Getting the mugshot was pretty awesome. I actually hunted down the police station where I got arrested, wrote a letter, and got this. So I was 16 years old, and you'd probably imagine I got in trouble for computer things, right? Like telephone fraud or teleconferences that we used to do with a bunch of hackers on the phone at once, prank calling people, all sorts of computer mischief. But what it ended up being is I broke into a telephone building, a physical telephone building, so I could get access to documentation and tools, test equipment, that a normal person isn't supposed to get access to. So again, it seemed normal. I wanted to get access to that stuff. I wanted to read how the telephone network worked. I wanted to read about how the linemen were doing stuff. It just turns out I probably should have asked them, you know, instead of doing that. So this ended up being the real turning point for me, where I had all this passion about electronics and hacking and doing all this stuff, but it was just the wrong direction, right? And that's okay. If you start off in that way, that's totally fine. If you can redirect yourself, that's the key. And I think a conference like ROADSEC is perfect for that, right? Because it's bringing together the whole community in Brazil, the hacker community, and giving resources, and now there's companies that are hiring. So it really is something where you have an opportunity to go the right path. When I started, I didn't. Luckily, by the time I got in trouble, I did. So another important thing is when I got in trouble, my parents didn't say, okay, you can never use a computer again, because that would be the typical response. But they knew that this is all I do, all I've ever done. So taking that away would have been a mistake, and I probably would have rebelled in some other way. So they actually supported me and said, okay, you are being stupid. Let's see if we can find somebody that will help you out a little bit better. And there was a group called The Loft, which was a hacker group in Boston, and I'll talk about them in a second. I'd been involved with them since the early 90s, but they sort of kept me at arm's length for a while. And they're like, well, we don't really want him around because he's doing dumb stuff. But once I got in trouble, they're like, all right. So they let me join. And these guys were all older than me. They became my mentors. And my parents actually paid the rent, my portion of the rent, for the space to help me. Because as a high school kid, I think it was $50 a month, which was not cheap. And they paid for that, so they let me be surrounded by mentors, and that was the key. So here's a video. This video came out in 1994 talking about The Loft. The Loft was one of the first publicly facing hacker groups, and we like to say that we always tried to share the good side of hackers, the good message of what hackers can do from a technological point of view, from a social change point of view, and just trying to educate the mainstream. So we had a hacker clubhouse that I'll show you the video of, and then over time, that sort of, we got a little larger and did some more stuff, but it was all this organic process. Like we didn't have a plan of let's build a company and get rich or whatever. The getting rich part didn't happen anyway. The building the company part did, but it was a natural thing. We had no plan. So here we go. Let's see if this works.
You know, everything in the loft was carried by hand up these stairs. So just remember that when you see the vacs, the two vaxes. So here we go. You know, some people have asked, like, what exactly, you know, what is the loft? And I was just like, well, it's like a clubhouse. You know? Except we don't have secret handshakes or anything. But it's neat too when we have like friends over, like visiting from out of state or whatever. And they're into computers like we are. You know, there's a place we can go. We bring them here, and they can sleep here. I mean, initially we were just looking for storage space, you know, to just store stuff, and it's turned into sort of a weird communal thing.
I've had a lot of this stuff for years. It's been in my basement, just sitting there. and I've never been able to use it. And now I've been able to bring it over here to the loft and actually use the stuff and play with it and see what it can actually do.
Talk to somebody, you know, over the net, say, oh, I got a question about, you know, blah, 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 and it's like, all right, let me dig out my manual and look it up. Well, I mean, here you can go and read somebody else's manual or ask them face-to-face, and it's a lot easier to share information when you're talking face-to-face.
All these manuals and shit.
Yeah, no shit.
The actual hardware, you can't get that online, and
yeah.
So you can.
Like, I want to learn how to hack Netware 311. Well, come here. You can hack our own LAN. You know, I don't care.
It's this project that me and Brian Oblivion are working on. It's basically a telephone dialer run off a microprocessor. It's like the Demon Dialer from Hacktick. It can just it does all the tones: blue box, red box, green box.
It's just the access to the technology is like centralized here, you know, in a place where anybody can come, you know, who's really into it and learn. I mean, that's the most important thing. We want to learn about everything. So.
Yeah, so that was Count Zero, one of the original founders of the Loft. And what he said was really important, right? He said, if you want to hack on something, you can hack on our own network. So having the Loft, having a hackerspace, I know there are some hackerspaces in Brazil, and you know, if you're getting into this industry, that's a great way to do it. You join a hackerspace, you set up your own network to hack on, you set up your own software to hack on, so you're not doing it against somebody else, and then they end up coming after you. It really was this resource for us of having a local hacker community. What ended up happening is we moved to a second space as we sort of got bigger, and let's see if I can show some pictures here. So it looks similar, but you know, lots of junk. Here's a little VAX over here. That was running at one point. Some other pictures. We had some art, decorations, magazines, arcade game. This is our hardware workstation. We had an old school logic analyzer, an oscilloscope. That video, by the way, I don't remember if I mentioned this. So that was from Unauthorized Access, one of the first documentaries about hackers from 1994, made by a woman named Annalisa Savage, and I think she's remastering it to make it better. She talks about hacker spaces all over the world, or hacker groups all over the world, so some great stuff coming out of Europe at the time, too. So we moved into this bigger space, and probably what we started getting known for, besides like trying to share the message, is our archives of information and discovering vulnerabilities in systems, where as we sort of got our group a little more cohesive, there ended up being 7 of us. A few of us were hardware people, a few of us were software people, and we just sort of worked on our own projects. But over time, some of the software guys who were full-time IT security people in their real jobs started finding vulnerabilities in systems. And they tell some really good stories about it, but the main thing is, like, one of the early times they went to Microsoft and found some vulnerability, and I believe it was how the landman hashes were computed. And they said, hey, we have a way that we can, you know, crack these passwords and crack these hashes and figure out these passwords. And Microsoft's like, yeah, you know, no one's ever going to actually do that. So they wrote exploit code to show, okay, fine, here's how it happens. And that was one of the early instances of sort of this full disclosure or responsible disclosure sort of thing, where you're, you know, helping the vendor help them fix the problem and then tell everybody else about it. But we had to sort of force them to realize there was a problem. Sometimes, though, we just wrote an advisory and released it without telling the vendor first, or the vendor would threaten to sue us, or just not respond. And it was at this time where, you know, on the software side nowadays, full disclosure of any sort is very common. We just saw some full disclosure stuff recently, a few days ago. And responsible disclosure, you have bug bounties where companies actually accept that they have problems. So it's really, really good. But yeah, this is what a website looked like in 1997. Hand-drawn HTML. So what sort of was the peak, I would say, of the Loft was our Senate testimony in 1998, where we basically were asked, as this group, and this was the first time a group of hackers had talked to the government in like a conversation, instead of like the government coming to arrest them. And I guess because of all of the publicity we had done over time, we got invited to testify about the state of computer security. How bad was computer security? This was 1998. The biggest thing that came out of this probably was, you know, the Loft says internet can be taken down in 30 minutes, which was one of the many things that we said. That was just the good media soundbite that they took. But it was basically trying to educate, you know, a bunch of your grandparents about technical things of security, and it was very, very hard to do. I didn't really know about the kind of impact of this until like a few years ago, because at the time, I was way younger. Again, I was freaked out. I didn't say anything, or very little, and just didn't realize how important that time was, because now we're starting to educate some of the government, which a lot of people will, I wouldn't normally choose to go do that, but it was, a really good opportunity. We were also the first group to testify with our hacker names in front of the government who weren't in the witness protection program, which I thought was cool. Like, we weren't trying to run away from anything. And we actually had a 20-year follow-up of this just a few months ago to talk about, like, what has changed? Like, is security just as bad? Can you do all of these things? And my answer was like, yes, it's actually worse, because there's way more devices, there's way more people, it's easy to sort of shotgun approach, hit a bunch of targets all at once. You have IoT devices that's just a complete nightmare, because they're basically, just resource-constrained computers that we can't even secure normal computers. How can we deal with all of these crappy devices, that mostly are made in China that we're plugging into our network? Like, it's just mind-boggling. And some people argue that things have gotten better, but I'm on the more sort of cynical, skeptical side. I'm going to show you sort of a funny video that came out of this. A lot of press, a lot of media coverage about hackers, and this was sort of, we wanted that, right? Because we wanted to show that hackers were good. So this was on Conan O'Brien, which was like a late-night talk show, one of the funniest ones I've ever seen.
Kind of weird. I found this. Talk about something that's a little frightening. I read this in the news yesterday. A group of computer hackers told Congress that hackers are now capable of shutting down the internet, redirecting commercial flights, and transferring millions of Wall Street dollars around the world. It's weird, yeah, which means the only thing hackers still aren't capable of doing is losing their virginity. And, there's a guy with thick black glasses crying right now in the third row.
And moving all the money out of your account.
Yeah, right. I'm completely screwed.
Yeah.
I'll show that red-haired freak. I don't fear nerds. That's the bravest stand I ever took here on the show. Wow. I'm sorry, I might be going out on a limb here, but I don't fear the nerds.
Yeah, so mainstream media making fun of us, big surprise. Anyway, that was again, like the top. And then we had this great idea of what if we could continue to be hackers and do what we love to do, but get paid for it? Like, that would be amazing. So we decided to join forces with some venture capital and actually start a company. At the time, doing research full-time was just unheard of. So we actually got a lot of pushback from the company about that. But we thought we were doing the right thing of trying to be able to all quit our jobs and do this. And at the time, I was had graduated college and we were all grown-ups. But it ended up not working out so well, because a group of friends that started as very ideological hacker people, now money got involved and it changed a lot of the dynamic. A lot of us didn't talk for a long time because business got introduced to it. And that's not to say that that won't work, but at least at the time, it didn't work. And there's a whole separate hours of story going into this. But this is a picture of the loft, one of the same pictures I showed earlier, except now with all of the stuff taken out. And I did some of the spray painting myself, but I didn't do the one that said sellouts. And at that time, the hacker community either thought it was really cool that hackers were trying to make some money doing consulting and building a company. Others thought we were totally selling out and compromising our ethics. And I definitely am somewhere right in the middle, if not agreeing with that. We thought we could do it, but we didn't. So fast forward a little while, and sort of continuing on with the theme of doing what you love to do. I just kept building electronics. I actually dropped out of the security space for a few years and just started building electronics again, which was, again, my other passion besides computers. And one day got a phone call from some people who wanted to do a television show about creating crazy prototypes of things. So just like the Loft was this opportunity to share the hacker message, Prototype This was an opportunity to share the engineering message and inspire people about building their own stuff instead of having to go buy everything. Even though the stuff we were building was like ridiculous, a robotic dog sitter and a automated pizza delivery with a self-driving car and all sorts of things. I'll show you a few of them, but it was just something that was really fun, and we didn't have to compromise how we normally were. So here's some 10-foot giant boxing robots that would move based on the movement of players outside the ring, and I have a little glyph on my back that would have some camera, computer vision tracking that, and accelerometers in my boxing gloves. That was pretty cool. Here's a 30-foot tall, giant computer-controlled water slide. So, water slide rides are normally, like 30 seconds long or something. This was a 2-minute or 3-minute water slide, and it would just spin and go left and right and project an image. So totally ridiculous stuff, but stuff that we actually should have gone to schools and showed off and stuff. But basically, the production company made us destroy everything after we did each episode. That was a bummer. For those of you who came over to the little workshop demo I had earlier of some of the hardware stuff, one of the pieces I was showing was the control system that would actually control this truck. And this was a truck that had legs that would come out, lift itself up, and we had omnidirectional wheels that could move in any direction, and we could move the truck around, in different ways. So the show aired about 10 years ago in the US. Internationally, it's been showing once in a while, but you can go to your favorite, pirate website, grab these, show them to all your friends, show them your kids, whatever. You can get DVDs on eBay too, but doesn't matter. Just get it and distribute it far and wide, because it's still relevant. Like the stuff we were doing then is really cool. And actually, some of the projects that we built then, which were just prototypes, just trying something out, companies had actually taken these ideas and turned them into real products. So you'll see some similarities if you watch the episode. So here's one that I thought would be really funny to show. Besides filming the show, we got to do lots of fun stuff besides just engineering things. This was part of an episode where we're building a personal airbag to prevent somebody from falling from a height of 30 feet or higher. So we wanted to test the reaction and sort of the strength of a normal car airbag, which normally is a blow at you. But we thought it would be fun to take a child-sized dummy and stick it directly on top of the airbag, and again, no reason, just thought it was cool. So here's the result.
3, 2, 1.
Yeah, okay. Don't put your child on an airbag like that. That would be bad. So yeah, the show was a lot of fun. And then after the show, same sort of thing, kept building stuff. I really have never thought about, the money has never been the goal, right? And that's really what this all comes down to again, and I'll mention this later on too, is yes, it's nice to make money, and it's nice to be able to support yourself, right? But I don't care about making a lot of money. I want to make enough money that I can survive and then do the fun stuff, do the stuff I want to do. I would much rather do that. I always tell people I'd rather eat out of a dog food can than go work at a company, which I know a lot of people can't do that, but I just, you don't have to sacrifice or compromise your ethics or your morals to be successful, right? Or to make money or to be happy or whatever it is. So just some other projects. So some DEF CON badges up at the top. Those were the first electronic badges for hacker conferences. I had those on display as well. Just as another way to get people interested in electronics. So, the Loft was separate, Prototype this was separate, and then the DEF CON badges sort of combined the hacker world and electronics, which was kind of fun. The JTagulator, there was a talk about JTag earlier today of using JTag to extract information from devices, extract memory. So that's a device that makes it easier for software people, mostly, to find the interfaces on a piece of hardware that you could use to exploit the system. And just different other circuitry, just stuff that I think will be fun or useful. But not everything has to be useful. Here's just another video I threw in here. This was one I was sort of experimenting with facial recognition, OpenCV tool set to do facial recognition. There's facial recognition all over the place now, and it's terrifying. So I use this as an excuse to mess around with that. I also don't have a lot of Linux experience, so I had a little BeagleBone Black, sort of Raspberry Pi type of Linux system that I messed around with and created this system inside of a Nintendo Virtual Boy game console, which didn't do very well in the 90s when it came out. So I'll show you what it does. So play some music. But if you point the camera at a face, draws awesome mustaches, and you get points. Every time you put your camera onto a face and push the button, you get more points. Actually, I call it mojo because everyone loves mustaches. But sometimes hacking doesn't have to have a purpose. It doesn't have to be security related. It can be whatever you want, right? If you're combining things together, you're testing something, it doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. So I guess that's sort of the summary for all of this, besides just telling, kind of silly stories. The lessons, and mostly I give technical talks, so even just to come and try to have some sort of philosophical insight about life, is pretty weird. But I tried, and love what you do is the main thing, right? It's like I mentioned, you shouldn't have to compromise what you like to do. Maybe you have to at first, and then that builds up enough momentum where you can go off on your own and break off and do what you like. But it really is important to continue doing what you love. Don't forget your roots, no matter where you're coming from. I see this a lot in the InfoSec community, where somebody releases a 0-day, or they give a presentation, and the media goes all over it, and it's like, wow, this is amazing. But what we have to remember is there was always somebody before us. We're always standing on the shoulders of giants. Even though the Loft was the first publicly facing hacker group, that doesn't mean there weren't hacker groups before then. The 414s out of, I think, they're going to kill me, I think Wisconsin. Other hacker groups had been around, they just weren't public. So, things have shifted over time, and anybody that thinks they found the best thing just hasn't learned from history. And I think that's really important, is just continuing. We want our community to kind of become this bigger and bigger snowball. But we have to remember, kind of where we came from and continue that. Also, so we don't sort of get swept up in the corporate side of things, right? Because as the industry gets bigger, there's going to be more corporate money involved. What happened at our consulting company, At Stake, which came out of the Loft, is that we were actually prevented from saying what we wanted to say because the things we wanted to say were about companies who were paying us money. So it really prevented us from doing things. So yeah, learning about the hacker community and kind of we're building on previous generations of other people's work. No matter where you enter in the cybersecurity space or in the hacker world, we're always building on somebody else's work. What's my final piece of wisdom? Yeah, and keep that hacker mindset. It's something where, if you're at ROADSEC, you probably already have it. Or maybe if you're just dabbling in hacking a little bit, it's something that you can learn, and you can realize how important it is to question and to think critically about things. I'm not going to get into politics, but I know you've had some politics. The United States has had some politics. We don't know what information is real, what information is not real. And as hackers, we can actually use our minds to distill that information, to think about what's real, what's not real. Even you use our mindset to educate other people about how to do it and how to think differently, instead of just believing everything that they see. Right? So it is this larger scope than just computer, electronics, whatever. There's more to it. And we have a real power to kind of change the world, or continue to change the world. So with that, before we answer questions, I will say thank you for listening. It's been an honor to come to Sao Paulo. I've never been to Brazil, so it's been super awesome. The ROADSEC community and Flipside, thanks to them for putting this together and getting everybody together, is really, really special. I've been to a lot of conferences all over the place, but this one really feels good. It's a good energy, so much stuff going on. And yeah, enjoy it and keep that momentum going. So yeah, thank you.